mama met a maker. Oh, to hell with that plan.
All right, yo ho ho in the mistletoe, everybody. I hope that Christmas treated you kindly. You're full of love and joy, better food, and you're ready for the new year. I want to say thank you. Look, you could be anywhere right now, but you're choosing to spend some time with us to figure out what is actually going out in the state of housing. And are we all going to die? And is the recession going to take us? And are we going to lose all of our home equity? Or holy moly, is everything going to be just okay? I'm pretty sure, pretty confident that you're going to find some excellent nuggets on here. Stay with us till the end. That's when all of our question and answer period will be. Take notes as you write them down. If you're like me and you're not going to remember what you're thinking 10 seconds later, throw the question in the chat box so we can get to it. This is not being streamed live, but it is being recorded. That doesn't give you permission to cut out early. It's just saying, hey, if you don't get your question answered, we'll make sure that we kick you out the recording, and then you can follow back up with us. So as much as I like to say 12 o'clock is 12 o'clock, I also understand that we're in between this weird season of Christmas and New Year's, and people are traveling and all that. So we'll hang out for another 2 minutes maybe, and let everybody get that coffee topped off or get their lunch out of the microwave and get situated. So give it another 2 minutes, stretch your legs, and then buckle up because we're about to have some fun. So we'll see you in about 2 minutes.
You're sideways walking. Time to find another path to take. Quit your whining, your bloodshot crying, faking like you're dying, never pays. Just go home. You need you some home. Boy, you need you some home. Her name was Peggy Sue, and her daddy hung the moon. In her eyes, he could do no wrong. But then he started drinking like there's a message in the bottle. Now daddy's painting Peggy black and blue. She closes her eyes through the hero's demise. Holds to a hope beyond the sky. She takes a breath, weight comes off her chest. She finds a way to weather through the storm. She cried out, home, I need me some home. Oh, I need me some home. I found myself on a train to California at 20.
All right, that's close enough to 2 minutes for now. I want to make sure we're honoring your guys' time. Hey, it's Ryan Otteson here, the broker owner.
Guys, I think Ryan is frozen. Kevin, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mike. I think Ryan was frozen for a minute, so he's gonna, looks like, try to log back on in just a second here. Well, let's give him 30 seconds. Sorry about that, guys.
Guys, while we're doing this, we've got a poll that we're curious about, and we want to get a little bit of feedback from those in the audience. So one of the questions, just as we're getting Ryan back here, that we're going to cover, but Steve, if you can go ahead and pop up that first poll, it has to do with housing values in the future. And this is an anonymous poll, but we want to get a sense of what the audience is thinking. 1 year out, will housing be higher, lower, or no change? So go ahead and pick which one you think. That'll give us some good insight for this conversation. And hosts and panelists, we're not allowed to vote. So this is purely audience participation. All right. Oh, look at this. We're split down the middle. 50% think we'll be higher. 50% think we'll be lower. Okay, very good. That's some good data right there. Half and half. All right. Looks like
we got Ryan back,
we
Mike.
got Ryan. We got Ryan back. Ryan, talk to us and get us pointed in the right direction. We'll get rolling.
Well, in my old line of work, we used to say a sniper got you. So that's how that happens. Hey, don't let me slop the flow of good information. Mike, keep running.
Mike, you're on mute.
Guys, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate you being here. This is about facts, not feelings. And one of the things that I know is super important is when we're trying to figure out what to do in real estate, it's important to have good, objective data. And we want to answer a question that's a big question that's weighing on a lot of people. And human beings are creatures that over time, we have learned experience that cause us to then make decisions in the future based on what's happened to us in the past. And a lot of folks either went through some very complicated times or they watched loved ones go through very complicated times in 2008. Okay. And so we want to answer the question with facts, not feelings. Does today's housing market resemble 2008? Okay. And what are we going to cover today? We are going to cover, are we in a bubble? We're going to cover rising interest rates. We're going to cover affordability. We're going to look at renting versus owning. We're going to look at supply and demand. We're going to look at foreclosures. We're going to look at forbearance, lending standards, inflation, and recession. Okay. So guys, I want to share something. When I bought my first house a number of years ago, I had a realtor that didn't care and a lender that wasn't there. Okay. That was the experience. And you want to talk about, as a first-time buyer, being highly uncertain and scared. I was newly married, had a fairly new job, and I didn't know what I didn't know. Okay. And that's some of that is the experience in the past that's helped to shape this. But we want to cover a couple of things in this talk: the pain that's existing in the marketplace, the problem that we're seeing, the possibilities that exist, and then based on facts, not feelings, a path to take. Okay. So there's a saying in business, which is we want to see a world no one else is seeing, and we want to play a game no one else is playing. That's one of the reasons actually we're super excited to be doing this with Ryan Austin. We work with a lot of real estate professionals. Ryan's one of a very select few that gets deep into the data. He's great with people and as one of the best I've ever seen, but it's really unique to be extremely good with people and have a math mind that is phenomenal as well. So Ryan, I know we're going to do some Q&A and you'll have a part of this presentation later. But thank you for bringing us together for this.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
So, okay, guys. So let's get rolling, guys. This next slide, I want to show you something that's a pretty fascinating slide. And if you were to poll, this is earlier in the year, if you were to poll, do we have worries of a housing bubble? 77% of consumers say, yes, we're worried about a housing bubble. 44% of real estate professionals say, yes, we're worried about a housing bubble. You want to talk about mass confusion in the marketplace, which is why we always go back to the math. Math tells a story. Today, we're going to get into the math, but it's going to be infographic math so we can see it and visualize it over time. That said, we're going to talk about a number of different things. The first thing we want to talk about is interest rates. Kevin Sprague, over to you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for being here. So one of the first topics we're going to cover, and we'll go into more depth on this in just a minute, of what's causing this and what's going to happen next. But one of the big challenges in this market right now for buyers and sellers to understand is what the heck is happening with interest rates, right? Because as interest rates rise, affordability becomes a challenge, right? The payment the buyer faces, it continues to rise and go up. And that can create uncertainty. It can create fear out in the market. So we have a couple charts here just to show you what's going on right now. I mean, looking at this chart, this is 2021 and 2022 with an average mortgage rate. 2021 was really flat, right around 3%. You know, we were right in the heart of kind of the COVID challenge, and the Fed was subsidizing some of this. And then in 2022, as inflation has increased, that's the big keyword we're seeing this year is inflation. Mortgage rates have followed suit. We've gone from around 3% to the high, a month or two ago around 7%. And now we're kind of in the sixes right now as we see that tick down just a little bit. That's a huge jump in a short period of time. So what we're going to talk about today is what's causing that and where we think this trend line is going in the next year or two. I also think it's really important on this next chart to see the perspective zoomed out a little bit over 50 years. You can still see a rapid increase on the right side of that chart, but the actual interest rate in the sixes, the fives, the sevens, not historically out of line. Really what was out of line is the last couple of years and what caused that to be super low. So look, rate is only one part of what a buyer or a seller is thinking through. Obviously there's the price, the rate, the overall payment. And that's really where it's become a challenge so far this year is helping on the affordability side. So I'll turn it back over to Mike to explain how these things interact and what this means from a buyer perspective.
Guys, when we want to answer the question, where is housing going in the future? There's a couple things we want to keep an eye on: supply, demand, affordability, and credit availability. Okay. Those are the things that are going to impact demand. Payment affordability, which can move very fast, and credit availability, which can also adjust pretty fast. So I share this because there's a term called payment shock. And one of the things that we've been experiencing these last couple of months is payment shock. Okay. What's happened to people? They've gone from not being able to get offers accepted to having affordability issues, frustration, anger, irritation. It's challenging, guys. Okay. So a number of years ago, I climbed Mount Whitney and Mount Shasta. And one of the things that the guides was super important in our process was for us to acclimate. Human beings need to acclimate to new settings. And one of the things that we've been doing economically and as individuals, as families, and as investors is we've been acclimating to a new environment. Okay. We'll talk about that a little bit in the future. But one of the key things that will drive housing, and it's more of a limiter, we're going to look at what could potentially cause the bottom to fall out, but we're also going to look at what could prevent growth in the future. Okay, those are two separate issues to look at. But you can see by this chart, going from 2000 out through, this one shows back through June of 2022, what the typical mortgage payment has done across the board. Okay, next slide, I want to show this. This is what's called an affordability index. Right now, one of the key challenges that we are up against, guys, is we have the highest challenge of affordability that we've had since, I think it's 1980 or 1981. I saw another chart recently that goes back, or maybe even this goes back. Kev, can you see what this is 1990s. So guys, affordability is a major pain point right now, and we're going to address what that is doing and what it will continue to do to housing in the future. But let's look at some context. Okay, next slide. Affordability today versus 2006. I want to show you the progression of what's happened over time. You go back to 2006, home prices were $248,000. Interest rates were about 6%. Monthly payment, $1,190. Hourly wages, okay, where were hourly wages compared to today? We always want to keep this in context. And then what was the percentage of income that was going to a housing payment across the board? About a third. And guys, we actually like to see about 30% or less of payments of income going to housing payments. A third or less is a comfortable place to be. Now, we've been in a highly affordable market for many, many years because of a whole series of reasons, but you can see the home appreciation back just a year ago. Again, this is nationwide. You can double it or triple it based on your area. 370 with rates at 3%. Look at this. You can see what the monthly payment was, $1,248. And hourly wages had increased up to $5,200. So across the nation, affordability was in a very comfortable place. Where are we now? Up in the over 400,000, rates in the mid sixes. Monthly payment is almost doubled in a lot of areas, but guess what? Hourly wages have not doubled. Okay, so we've got some serious pain on the affordability standpoint. Place. That's one issue. I want to share another issue that most people aren't talking about, but it is very relevant for today's market. Guess what drives the marketplace? A combination of fundamentals and psychology. Fundamentals and psychology. We're going to talk about psychology for a minute. Why are we showing you this chart? Guys, this is fascinating. Affordability challenges. This is of current homeowners, existing rate versus the maximum rate that somebody would be willing to take on a future home purchase. So let that settle in for a second. What would you be willing to take for a new mortgage rate to buy in this marketplace today? You want to know why real estate came to a screeching halt over the last few months? Because if rates are 7% or higher, only 7% of the population is willing to say, sign me up for a new home right now. Regardless of affordability, this is psychology alone. It's not feeling like it makes sense, even if it does, okay? Then if you go and you say, if rates have a 6 handle, 6% to 6.99, this is the second from the far right, you open up another 8%. So a total of 15 out of 100 people say, yes, let's go buy if rates are at a 6 or a 7%. Psychology alone, not affordability. Guys, look at this. We're going to talk about this later in the conversation, but look what happens when you get into the 5s and into the 4s from people that are willing to buy, again, separate from affordability, willing to buy based on where rates are. You open up a wave of new buyers. Okay, that's something that most people are not even thinking about, is the psychology that's happening in the marketplace right now. Okay, next slide. We'll come back to the psychology in a minute. What are we dealing with on affordability? Guys, a lot of people are landlocked and they're math locked too. All right, look at the house you're selling. If it's $500,000 and you have a mortgage that's at 3%, which if I remember correctly, I think about 70% of the population has a rate that's 4 or below in the 3s. Mortgage payment is $1,000 a month. And if you want to move up and go to a home that's 700,000, look at this, and you're rolling over some equity, your payment triples. Who's excited about that? I'll tell you, no one is. Okay. And think of it the other way. Let's say it's time to downsize. Kids have moved out. They're off to college. You got too much house and you want to move from 800,000-900,000 down to 500,000-600,000. Well, your payment may be the same or even higher based on the financing that you have locked in. So we have a challenge right now that has to do with artificially low interest rates for a number of years now that we're in a more normalized market. And one of the reasons that we're seeing a decline, not in values per se, but in sales, is specifically because of this issue and the psychology issue. All right, gotcha. So guys, we're going to talk about, again, there's actually a lot of things that are very positive, but we're going to point out some of the negatives first. We want to get right now into the concept of, or the discussion, which we hear in headlines all the time. It's the word recession. What does a recession mean for real estate? Kevin's going to walk us through this. Kevin.
Thanks, Mike. So this is something I think a lot of people, the challenges are obvious with affordability, like Mike talked about when we look at the data. The big question I think everybody needs to know is what's going to happen next, right? And if a recession comes, which depending how they define it, we may or may not already be in a recession. But what this shows here is as the year has gone on, more and more economists are agreeing that we're in a recessionary type economy or that that's coming soon. And what I think most people assume is that when they hear the word recession, it's kind of the same meaning as housing crash. And that does not necessarily mean that that's what's going to happen. When we look at this next slide, this shows the last 6 recessions in the US and what housing did as a result of those recessions. As you can see, 4 out of the 6, housing went up. That 5th one, housing was very flat and neutral. 2008 is what people project, I think, as being what a recession is. The big difference in 2008 when housing did crash is that housing, the mortgage world, the equity position, the ability to pay back mortgages is what caused that Great Recession to occur, which is why the bottom fell out of housing that time. So this is really important to realize. I think as a potential buyer and seller, it does not mean if a recession comes that housing is going to crash by default. There's certainly different aspects that impact that. Looking at this next slide is one of them. This is, what do interest rates do? Mortgage interest rates during the last 6 recessions. This is pretty clear that recessionary times typically mean lower interest rates because typically inflation slows down and the Fed has to react sometimes as a result. So we'll look at this on the next chart as well, just showing it in perspective on that same chart that we looked at earlier. Highlighted in yellow, these are the last 6 recessions in the US and what mortgage interest rates did as a result. So if we think rates are going to come down again, which we'll talk about in a minute with inflation and that pattern, that's part of the reason during recessions that housing usually stays flat or even can go up, because that affordability challenge for buyers eases, which can drive more buyers back into the market and create more competition for the same home. So we thought this was really important to show. Now, inflation is the key. Is inflation going to slow down, and when? that might drive those mortgage rates back down? I'll turn it back over to Mike to talk about the inflation side a little bit.
So guys, one of the things that is really helpful is to if you want to understand where housing is going, we have to understand where mortgage rates are going. Again, supply, demand, credit availability, affordability. Okay. Mortgage rates are going to have a heavy weight on the direction of home values and home sales over time. Okay. Home values is the question on the table. We're doing this seminar specifically to answer the question, is it safe to buy? Yes or no? Is there the potential for the bottom to fall out of the housing market and us to lose 20, 30% of our home value? Okay. These are the things that keep people up at night. So let's get to it. Mortgage rates and inflation. If you want to understand where mortgage rates are going, what are mortgage rates pegged off of? Inflation or the expectation of inflation in the future. Okay. Mortgage rates are going to very closely over time correlate with inflation. So the question is, what is happening with inflation? All right, let's go to this next slide. Inflation may have really peaked this time. This is what a lot of us are hearing and seeing and reading for those of us that study inflation. Okay, what is inflation made of? Energy, core goods, all of the various things that make up inflation. What we're doing is we're looking at, and what is inflation? Inflation, guys, is too many dollars chasing too few goods. Okay, more money following less goods. And what does that do? There's two types of inflation. There's demand pull and there's cost push inflation. And we've experienced both this past year for a whole series of reasons. But we want to answer the question, what's happening with inflation? To answer the question, where will mortgage rates go? To answer the question, what's going to happen to housing? Okay, next slide. Take a look at this. Well, the question is, when will inflation peak, or have we peaked? Well, let's take a look at this. If we want to look at what's going to happen to inflation, we can look at the month over month readings, because inflation, the reading of it and what sparks and just rolls through the market is, what are the last 12 months of inflation readings added up? So you can see in November, we had a 0.2 reading. What did we do? We replaced if you go back to the a year ago, we replaced a November 0.5 reading. Okay, so why is this happening? Well, a lot of this is the Federal Reserve yanking on short-term interest rates. I don't know if any of you guys learned to drive a stick shift or manual. My dad taught me to drive a stick shift when I was a kid, and we had this emergency brake right in the middle. Okay, it was not on the floor, it was in the middle. And if you want to get an understanding of what the Fed does, they have one tool. It's to move short-term interest rates, and they either let the e-brake down or they yank on the e-brake. And if they're raising rates, it's like yanking on the e-brake. It's slowing down the vehicle. Okay, and when they do, guess what happens? That contains inflation, because they make it more difficult in order for businesses to make money. And if there's less money flowing, then guess what? You don't have as much money chasing too few goods. So what we are seeing, and we're going to watch this very closely, is month over month, what is happening with inflation and what is it going to replace in the future? We knew we would have a spike in interest rates, but just watching this month to month. And guess what, guys? As we look into the first quarter of next year, we think it's highly likely we start to see a decline in inflation, subsequently a decline in mortgage rates based on the Fed's action and what's going to play through. All right, let's look at a cycle here. Someone just had a good question. I'll get to that in a minute. Let's take a look at, there's a saying, which is history. Maybe it doesn't necessarily repeat, but it very much rhymes. Okay, we're going to look at a cycle throughout history that can give us a good idea of what will happen with rates, what will happen with housing. Look at this, fascinating. You guys all know Volcker, and what Volcker did was he made it extremely painful for the economy by raising short-term interest rates, yanking on the e-brake really hard to slow down the economy. Why did he do that? Because he needed to tame inflation. Inflation had gone from 7 to 14%, and mortgage rates had gone from 12 to 18. And what did he do? He raised the federal funds and the discount rate from 11 to 20. Super aggressive. And guess what happened to inflation? Took a while, but it went from 14 down to 5. What did mortgage rates do? Some of you guys remember this. This is before my time. Mortgage rates went from 18 to 12. Greenspan, similar pattern. A lighter cycle, but a similar pattern. And with Jerome Powell, guess what, guys? We're going through the exact same cycle. Inflation went from 1.75 to 9. It's the bottom left-hand corner. Mortgage rates went from 2.5 actually up into the 7s. Okay. Federal funds rate, where are we going to land? 5-ish, we'll find out. Inflation, it's already starting to drop. Subsequently, mortgage rates are going to drop. Guys, this is going to have a direct impact on what's going to happen with housing values. Direct. You'll see how all this ties together in a minute. Okay. So, all right. This is something many of you guys on this call, you may know the Barry Habib. A lot of our information comes from John Malden, Barry Habib, Lacey Hunt, Calculated Risk, Logan Montashami, if you guys want to follow people that are super insightful on this stuff. But mortgage rates should move similarly on a downward trajectory, probably giving us around 5, even below 5% within the next 6 months. This is Barry Habib. Okay. There's very intelligent people that think that the likelihood of 5% and even potentially 4-handle interest rates in 2023 is very high. You know what that's going to do to housing? You'll see in a minute. But I wanted to share that with you. And then let's look at one more thing that is telling us we think mortgage rates are coming down. Guys, check this out. Mortgage rates and the 10-year treasury, if you look back over the last 30 plus years, they trend very closely over time. And usually there's a spread of about 175 to 200 basis points between these two. For whatever reason, actually it's a technical explanation, I'm not going to get into it in this talk, we actually got up to 300 basis points above the 10-year treasury with mortgage rates. So we knew they'd be coming down. We knew they wouldn't be in the 7s for that long. Guess what? They're down in the 6s now. My point is this. We can see a number of things that are pointing toward mortgage rates coming down, partially because of inflation, partially because of the spread. And that's going to have a direct impact on housing. Guys, a lot of people say, I wish I had a crystal ball. There is a crystal ball. You can see where housing is going by looking at a lot of the math behind the scenes when it comes to inflation and it comes to recessions. So we want to hit pause here because there's a big topic. And we've seen some scary headlines about foreclosures and foreclosures coming. So what we're going to do is a little bit of a zoom out. Kevin, over to you for foreclosures.
Yeah, this goes back to what Mike talked about earlier, where there's perception and there's fear and there's mindset and then there's the facts, right? And these are some of the headlines. I mean, I've seen all these on my feeds. I'm sure you guys have as well, right? Foreclosures surge, foreclosures jump, foreclosure starts rise. All of these are accurate. It's not that the stats are wrong, but the headlines are meant to scare you and meant to sensationalize what's going on. So when we look at the next chart, we'll show some perspective of these surges that they're talking about. Check out the right side of this screen. Those last 3 bars are 2022, right? And this chart goes all the way back to 2005. And this bump up on the right side is what everybody's reporting as the surge. And yes, it is a surge compared to 2020. But if we remember right, in 2020 and 2021, there were forbearance options for people out there in the market readily available with COVID. And what that meant basically is that servicers could not foreclose on the house if you wanted to go into forbearance and not make your payment for a temporary period of time. So the surge is like surging off basically zero. It's not surging compared to the last 10, 15, 20 years of the market where we look at it and say, hey, it's a big worry. It's almost like it's normalizing back to like somewhat normal levels, which we fully expect to happen and even increase a little bit further, but it's not necessarily that it's worrisome long-term. Looking at the next chart, this actually shows foreclosures that were actually completed, and there's even less of a surge when you look at this versus the starts. Starts means that the foreclosure process has started and people have to find a way to sell. Completed foreclosures, people who couldn't sell. So because of equity in properties and all that and sort of stuff we'll talk about later, there's even less of a surge when you look at actual completed foreclosures rather than just the starts. And this next chart we'll touch on for just a minute. Forbearance, like I mentioned, a lot of people think forbearance is a big deal right now where, you know, as soon as these plans end, the market's going to be flooded with inventory again. You can see on this chart, this is active loans still in forbearance. It's less than 1 million forbearances nationwide now, about 500,000, I believe. Whereas the peak right after it started was up 10, 20 times that amount. So this is basically a non-issue, we think, moving forward from an inventory perspective. Now, one thing that is dramatically different as well from last time around, I'll let Ryan jump in and talk about this and what he's seeing as well. But equity in homes is so much different now than the lead up last time because of this run up in prices in the last few years. So Ryan, if you want to jump in, tell us what you think the equity position looks like nationwide and how that impacts what we think is going to happen next with housing.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, Kevin. It's funny. Let me backtrack off the foreclosures for a second, right? I was doing some rough math while you had the screens up. And if we look at what started, just the starts, right? So what does that mean? Like we throw around the vocabulary. So when somebody says that foreclosure start, you miss a one payment, technically you're in foreclosure and they start the process of communicating to you. When I did quick math, it was under 100,000. And so I just did 100,000 over 50 states. That's like 1,500 starts per state. And the closures, I'd averaged at 30 because it was way under 50. That's like 600 foreclosures a state on average. Not a wave does that make, right? Especially when foreclosures, and I made all of my bread and butter 8, 9, 10, and 11 selling foreclosures, 12s doing short sales. So I'm relatively familiar with that process. Looking for another wave at least once in my lifetime, this isn't it. When we look at the equity position, you're talking about, I loved the slide that you showed where it dropped down, right? So 2008, you're saying the market hit and lost 19%, right? That slide, it was a big red negative drop down, 19.7. If right now in our area, Glendora to Rancho, if we hit and we went to go backwards, right, just to 2021 numbers, 2020 numbers, we'd lose 25%. So we can absorb a 19% increase, 19% decrease in equity today, and we would still have more equity than we had in 2020. So it's a phenomenal thing. And so I think as we talk about this, feelings not facts, and I love the psychology of this, it's we've almost been abused, right? Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. And so when you're building unhealthy habits and unhealthy expectations of something that's not going to last, right, then it feels like a monster takeaway. This is the frustration Mike was talking about earlier, where I'm going to wait. Oh, the threes will be around forever now. Well, now you're not getting an interest rate in the 3% anymore, right? So it feels bad. But from an equity position, we have plenty of equity where we can absorb a 25% hit and still be where we were in 2020, which most people were astonished that they could sell their house for that much in 2020. And I'm quoting numbers from April. So right after the pandemic hit, they were still shocked at how high they were.
Well said. Well said. Thanks, Ryan. And a couple other factors. I mean, this one I think is pretty well publicized, but the lending standards this time around are so much different, right? And what happened last time with the crash as well, the Fed was raising rates, but a lot of people who had bought homes in the years leading up to 07, 08 were on, adjustable rate, teaser payments. They probably weren't well qualified to begin with, right? From an income or a credit perspective. This shows the amount of loans written with a credit score below 620 year over year over the last 20 years. You can see the drop off after the Great Recession. So as the Fed raises rates this time, anyone who's on a fixed rate loan right now, which is almost everybody nationwide, is not being impacted at all by the Fed raising rates. So it's a huge difference where we think people are still going to be able to make their payments on a much higher level than leading up to last time, which is great for housing. I mean, it just lends stability that there's less foreclosures and short sales coming. And then this next chart shows actually like the types of products that instead of the borrowers, the product risk versus the borrower risk. Mike, do you want to touch on this for a minute?
Yeah, guys, this is, I grew up in New York and Connecticut, used to go ice skating as a kid. And so look at the red, kind of think of that as like thin ice. If all conditions aren't perfect, you're going to fall through. Okay. So that's the product risk. And then the borrower risk. If we look at our group, we've helped about 5,000 families over the last 5 years with either a purchase or refinance. And so we've been able to very closely see the quality of credit and know intimately the safety of the loans based on a whole series of Frank Dodd regulations that came out after the Great Recession. So we're in a different world today. It's a different world when it comes to credit standpoint. And I want to share something that I think is pretty fascinating. Oh, actually, like right now, if we were to look at it, instead of having roughly a third of all of the loans in place are adjustable with some level of credit risk or product risk to them, it's closer to about a tenth of that in this market. Okay. Just a very, very different climate when it comes to product and borrower risk. Okay, so that's one for stability in the marketplace. Look at this next slide. I want to share something with you guys that I think is fascinating. Most of you have either seen the movie or read the book, The Big Short. Actually, I have it right here. Third time. Love this book right here. But one of the things in here, that one of the key characters is a gentleman by the name of Michael Burry, and he's the founder of Scion Capital. Okay, they were one of the early guys that realized that this was a house of cards back before the Great Recession. But look at something he says. He says, the setup is radically different today. Sure, home prices are skyrocketing and they've leveled out, and you can correct it a little bit. But he says home prices did not crash in 07 and 08 because they had climbed so high. Home prices crashed because, among other things, borrowers could not make the mortgage payments. Guys, key difference. Again, we're comparing 07 and 08 to today. In this market, every loan that's put in place up until just the last 6 months or so is on the lower end of affordability. Okay. And guys, one other thing too, just to draw an interesting parallel, the United States is one of the few nations that has 30-year fixed products. If you look at just about every other country out there, guess what? They have product risk. They have 3 and 5 years where it resets every single time. So there's going to be a lot of pain in other nations. We're seen as a safety place for a lot of foreign money because of the stability. Despite all the craziness that goes on, we're seen as a safe place economically for a whole series of reasons. So I bring this up, guys, because what we're trying to understand is, can we crash? Can the bottom fall out? How much support is there? And so we want to share that. But let's just say that people are concerned about renting, about owning. What's the alternative? The alternative is to rent. Kevin's going to unpack rent for us. Kevin.
Yeah, we'll touch on this briefly, and then we'll start to wrap up with some of the supply and demand stuff. But rents are not I'm sure everybody knows it's not a great affordable alternative right now because inventory levels are so low and rent prices continue to increase. So this is like a median asking rent over the last 30 years or so. We don't think this is dramatically going to fall off anytime soon. Looking at the next chart, we can run this for specific buyers where we show like a rent versus own comparison, right? Where we plug in, your purchase price, your payment versus your rent, and show a fixed mortgage versus rising rent over time, and how the mortgage actually could help you build wealth quicker, obviously through appreciation, paying down the loan, and a stable fixed payment rather than the rising rent. So we can touch on this again later, just wanted to show it. But I think to sort of wrap up, we want to get to the basic fundamentals, supply and demand. Mike, I'll turn it back over to you and Ryan to talk about the inventory levels and the supply.
Yep, sounds good. So guys, we hear the word inventory all the time. It's thrown around. So let's talk, what is inventory? Picture as if you're going to go to the store and you're going to buy some milk. Okay, how much milk is on the shelf? And if there was no new milk delivered to the store, how long would it take for that milk to be gone based on the run rate of people buying? Okay, so right now, if we say that we've got 2 months of inventory, consider that like, 2 days of milk, for example. All right. And so that's what we're measuring, is what is the inventory? What is product available with the current run rate? So we always want to look, and we've seen a massive run up, right? This is called massive. We've seen a massive run up in inventory lately. The shelves are filled with milk. Okay. Let's see, let's zoom out and look at some context, because you can see inventory's gone from, what is it, Ryan? Like it's like little under a month up to, kind of over a month, maybe almost 2 months, some different markets. Let's zoom out and look at this in context. Oh, look at this. Look at this. So there's something seasonal that happens in addition to cycles that take place. So guys, you know what? I hate when the media does this, because every single time you go through a Thanksgiving through winter season, there's a lot less inventory that goes on the market. So you have these cycles that go through. Why do we have cycles throughout the year? Because parents want to move when they can have their kids in a school and not put them in partway through. So you're going to see a lot of planning and sales that take place based on moving around a school year. That's why you see these year-to-year cycles. But if we look at the cycle where we're in right now compared to going back through the Great Recession, we've got not enough inventory. We just flat out don't have enough inventory. There's one slide that's about buyer and seller markets. Ryan's going to cover this for us. Ryan, over to you.
Yeah, so this is a great conversation. Again, I want to pause really quick and go back to the affordability thing because I was looking at my notes. We talk about it's so unaffordable right now. But again, you guys pop the slide up. Don't jump back to it. When you looked and it said we're about the peak unaffordability we've been at, just a little bit higher than that was 2006, and everybody was buying a house in 2006. There was no conversation, which goes to your point because the product was risky, right? So people were buying houses, even though it was almost as unaffordable as it is right now, but the product had a much higher risk rate to it, right? If you haven't seen The Big Short, go watch it. It's a phenomenal movie. Let me know. I'll see if I can rent a movie theater if we get enough people and we'll show it again. So what does this mean, the buyer's market, seller's market? If you're a realtor on this call and you're telling people it's a buyer's market right now, shame on you. If you're a lender on this call and you're telling people it's a buyer's market right now, shame on you. Stop lying to the consumers and causing chaos. It's not accurate, nor is it right, nor should you be writing offers just because you don't know how to tell your buyer, hey, this is not a healthy offer to write. It doesn't make any sense. Look at this right now. The buyer's market is greater than 7 months of inventory, and a seller's market is less than 6. You could even argue that a seller's inventory is really less than 4, and at 4 to 6 months, it's kind of a normal market, right? That 5 to 7 month house is going to sit on the market 60 days or so. This is realtors. You know this if you've heard it, and if you're a consumer on here, right? It's typically 90 days from a paycheck. So if I work with the buyer or I secure a listing, I'm typically 90 days away, 30 to 45 days marketing, getting the offers accepted, 30 to 45 day escrow period. So we're typically in that 90-day window. If you look at inventory, that was a massive screen. If we can show up and go hyper local really quick, right? So if we're looking from Glendora to Rancho, I ran these numbers this morning. So if you look under Glendora to Rancho, look, we literally right now, November of 2022, it's the middle column. We're at 1.9 months of inventory. That's November of 2022. That's what we would call a record low inventory. Now, here's what you hear on the news is, oh, we have this days on market. It's up 200%, which it is, from 12 unrealistic to 36. That's incredible. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And that was from May of 2022, right, to November of 22. If you look back at the trend lines, I don't have the graph. I'm not sharing my screen with you to show you the graph. That would typically be the peak. If we continue to flatten out now or we dip a little bit more, we've peaked out of May of 2022, right? So May of 2022, our prices have only come down 6%. It's not the end of the world, sellers, right? Buyers, it's not your market yet. Sellers, this means you're going to have to, do some normal, healthy things. The other thing I love about supply is look at December of 21. So just below that, December of 2021 was about the last time we were at the numbers we're at right now in terms of sales price, days on market, month supply, right? So if you look, just in December of 21, we were down at 21 days on the market with only 1 month supply of inventory. Now, I told you that I wanted to find out what was that like right after COVID, last big peak, right? Everyone thought we were going to drop. And if you just continue staring down there, this is where I told you we could absorb a 25% hit from November to April, and we would still just be where we were in April to 2020. But here's what's funny, right? During that pause, that little 6-week window where nobody knew what was going to happen, our days on market were 29. Today, they're 36. Our inventory was 2.5. Today, we're at 1.9. So we actually have less houses to sell, which is why I believe you're starting to see the prices settle off. Now, you might be asking, why do I have San Bernardino on the right? It's a great question. I'm glad you asked. This is a good indicator for, look, San Bernardino, lower income housing, that sort of lower demographic buyer, they take the hits faster, right? When foreclosures happen, when prices drop, they tend to hit first, but they also tend to recover first and faster, which is why you see a lot of investors in the Inland Empire. So even the city of San Bernardino, if we just go down the same sort of pattern, the peak versus now, or we look at November versus December of 21 and down, they are still 2.5, 1.3, and 1.6 supply. We have no inventory out there. So sellers, there are buyers. There are buyers today. And if we pull in Mike's numbers, right, I was taking notes. I hope you're taking notes too. If we look at some of these numbers, it says that 7% of the people will buy it with a 7% interest rate. 8% of the population will buy in the 6s. So we're in the 6s right now. That means 15% of the population will buy. There are tools out there. Look for another webinar on tools to get your offers accepted, where you can actually buy down an interest rate, get that thing into the 5s. Now, if we have interest rates in the 5s, now we have 36% of the population is ready to buy today, and you've only lost 6% of your income. right? So, or 6% of your equity. So if you're looking and saying, Ryan, I'm not willing to lower my house, I don't have to. There's no inventory. I can hang out for 30 to 45 days and wait, and you'll get a buyer, right? We're actively putting our listings in escrow today. We opened one up on Tuesday, the day after the Christmas holiday. This is a real conversation. So when you look at these inventory, now it's about structuring the price right, but sellers, you too, have to not be greedy anymore. Just as much as the buyers were hooked on an unhealthy habit of a 3% interest rate, some of us are in the twos, right? Sellers, you were hooked on an unhealthy habit that said, I'm not going to touch my house. I'm not going to do common courtesies like a termite report. I'm not going to fix anything, right? The gravy train, well, the gravy train's done. Now you got to act like a seller again. Now you have to do some normal things. Expect a request for repair. Shame on you for not doing your deferred maintenance. Get a termite report. Give the buyer the termite clearance, right? These things aren't going to hurt you. Now we just have to properly price the home, right? We're not even talking about pricing ahead of the market yet. Pricing ahead of the market is where we start to see month after month after month. We're taking 6, 8, 9% hits month after month. Now we have a different conversation about pricing ahead of the market. We can still price at market pricing, especially looking at these things and having a conversation with you that says, can we leverage an interest rate buy down to keep more equity in your pocket and get a buyer in the 5s, which takes my buyer's population from 15% to over 30%? And that answer is yes. So you're still sellers in a great position, and buyers, there are serious sellers out there right now. It's can you put the two together when you understand how to put an offer together with facts, not ramped full of feelings. Back to you, Mr. Mike.
Beautiful. Good stuff. All right. So guys, let's look at, this is the last part of this talk now, and we're going to look at a supply challenge and a massive demand change that's coming. All things in life are a function of supply and demand. Okay. Next slide. Look at this. One of the things that, I'm sorry, back to 35. When we look at what's happening in the future, one of the things that we want to look at is, are we undersupplied or oversupplied as we move to the future? And guys, there's about, 330 million people in this country. There's about 200 million plus or minus people that have jobs. There's over 100 million of housing structures. But in order to keep up with demand, population demand, we need to be adding about 1.5 million new builds each year. Okay. And I want to show you a challenge. And one of the reasons we just had this silly run up in price is, if you were to just draw a line across the screen, that's kind of what we need to maintain and match population growth. We went way above it back in 03, 4, 5, and 6. And then guess what builders did? They went out of business. They all of a sudden, like, real estate crashed back in 07 and 08 and 09, and they didn't build for a number of years. So what we're doing is we're playing catch up, and we're just now getting past the place of being able to get in front of a demand issue that we have. I'm going to get to that in a second, but look at this next slide. America is short more than 5 million homes, and builders can't make up the difference. Guys, this is a serious problem that no one is talking about right now. Everyone's focused on the wrong things. Let's look at this next slide, and I want to show you how this works. This is matching household growth and annual completions. Okay. What is household growth? When I went to college, I was technically still living with my parents. After graduating, I moved in with 4 other buddies. Okay. We got rented a house together. So that was one household formation. Okay. We took up another unit. Let's just say all of us got married, bought houses the next year. That means we went from 1, we added 4 more household units. Okay. Household growth. So that's what's happening, is like, you can't live with your parents forever, right? And so as population grows, you're going to have household growth that takes place. Demographics is destiny. If you want to learn one thing from this, look at the demographics. It will tell you what will happen in the future. Now we're going to match household growth with annual completions. And look at this. What happened in 04, 5, 6, and 7? We had way more completions than growth. Okay. Guess what happened? It caused one of a series of things. We covered the other ones. It caused housing to come down significantly in value. Most completions in history. Okay. And a huge drop in formations. Now look at where we are. Guys, we have more household growth taking place in completions and it's not slowing down. Now, you want to see what's coming next? This is where we are today. Let's look into the future a little bit. Next slide. I think this is fascinating. US will add 25 million households by 2035. This is written in 17, but between 20, let's see, where is it? Between 11.5 million households between 2025 and 2035. There's a wave of buyers coming that no one is talking about. And it's significant, okay? Price is a function of supply and demand. And guess what? There's a wave of buyers coming. Next slide. You want to visualize this? Take a look at this slide. This is births that underlie each generation. People buy when they're, I heard it just changed to 34. So this is technically outdated, but people buy when they're 33 or 34 years old. And this is a chart that shows people turning 33 in 2006 versus people turning 33 years old today. And guess what happened in 2006? All of a sudden, there's a bunch of buyers that came out of the marketplace. Just looking at birth rates. Guys, this is just math. And then look at where we are today. We have a wave of millennials pouring into the marketplace and then post-millennials that is going to provide a massive amount of buyer demand and support, underlying support in housing. And we don't have enough houses. Okay, this is math. This is another, the next picture. I want to show you this one too. Generational demographics. Look at the baby boomers, look at the X-Gen, look at the new boomers coming in. And you can see right in the middle of the X-Gen, guess what happened in 2006, 7, 8, and 9? Housing crash. And it followed the trend of demographics. How about that? Okay. And in addition to having an oversupply. In fact, this next, I don't have this book handy, but go to this next slide. If you want to, if regardless of your business, mine is housing and mortgage business, but if you want to understand where things are going in the future, read the age curve and you can understand how to get in front of what's happening demographically. So guys, we've covered a lot today. We're right at the end of 2022. This is the forecast for 2022. And I want to show you also the next slide, which is the 2023 forecast from people that have lots of money and all this data and more and what they're saying. And I actually saw another recent one, which was, basically when you average them out, it was coming out to very flat for 2023 for a series of reasons. My expectation, and Zellman's traditionally pretty bearish on things. She's been, I mean, she thought we were going to lose money. We were going to drop even 2 years ago. So like all things, you can always typically throw out the lowest and the highest one. But guys, things are looking really flat from a value standpoint based on a whole series of things. The key driver is going to be what happens with inflation and mortgage rates. Here's where we have to be careful. Look at this next slide, guys. I want to show you what happens in the media. If you were to follow the headlines, guess what? It would have cost you a lot of money over the last decade. Why? The majority of headlines every single year are meant to attract eyeballs, not educate you. In 2015, we're in a bubble larger than 2006. Are you kidding me? That's the most ignorant statement you can possibly make. All the way down the line, housing market is going to shift in a bad way for buyers. Next year will be hot on housing. Housing boom is over. I mean, it's just, guys, every single time you look, you have to be very, very careful about this because everything you see is going to be pointing you toward fear, and fear freezes people. So where is the sentiment today? Let's look at the sentiment today. Housing sentiment falls to lowest level since 2011. Oh, it's kind of interesting. Short of, let's see, we had right at the peak of the first early month of the pandemic. But look at this, guys. How much real estate do you wish you would have bought in 2011? Yeah, a little bit. And I say this, I don't think we're going to have the same run up because guess what? We have a whole different series of things. We're going to actually look very much like, my opinion, not 07, 8, and 9 for this next year or two. If you look back to the early 80s, you know what real estate did? It had very similar demographic wave coming in. It had undersupply. It had an affordability issue, a serious affordability issue. And I actually don't know the loan products back then, so I can't speak to that. But you know what it did? It was pretty flat for a while. It was pretty flat. What they didn't have was a surge of new buyers coming in as significant as we have today. So that's something in our favor. Last slide, Sir John Templeton. I think this is fascinating. If the crowd is all running one direction, look the other direction and see if there's opportunity there. The best time of the time of maximum pessimism is the best time to buy, one of the best investors ever. So I'm saying this, guys, because my money's where my mouth is. I'm part of a fund that's we launched a couple of years ago. Ryan's been instrumental in helping us with a lot of our development of this fund. We're building out 100 units, and we do a whole series of different fix and flip projects as well. But I share this, guys, because I'm doing this as much to protect my own investment and my investors as we are to advise our clients on whether it's safe and makes sense to buy. This last slide, we'll get to Q&A. Guys, we have something really unique called a real estate report card that can drill down to specific areas. This one and another one to understand inventory, supply, demand, affordability, homes being built, how much is needed, affordability per area, future expected appreciation. So if you need guidance when it comes to real estate to drill down for a specific area, this could be the buying or selling side, we've got data on that. So anyway, I thought I would cover that with you guys, but Ryan, let me turn it back to you. Let's see if there's any questions for today.
Yeah, as we're pulling into questions, I think we can answer this. Let me do it. Let me be the one who chews on his feet in a couple of months if I'm wrong, right? Is the housing market, is the bubble going to crash, or is this thing going to fall out on us? I'm going to say no. Why? Because there's so many factors that you guys have hit on that we've alluded to on why this market is not 2008. And why do we only compare to 2008? It's the last thing in our brain, right? See, all we're talking about is an up market or a crash. What about the normal cyclical market that we're a part of? What about a normal reset? What about prices running up, dropping down 8 to 10%, staying flat for a little, running back up, falling back down a little? This is a normal 5 to 7 year hit. What we haven't talked about is we've been on an upcycle for 12 years, right? I mean, realistically, if you get technical about the upticks since the crash, it started 11 or 12. So for 10 years, 11 years, we've been on an upcycle. A natural, healthy reset is completely different than a crash coming. Now, I will tell you, save all your money, get in Mike's fund, get ready to operate. I hope, honestly, sorry, everybody, but I hope that one more time in my life, I see a 2008, because a lot of people made a lot of money in 2008, 9, 10, buying a lot of houses and cash flowing them as rental properties. And so I'd like to put myself in a position to take advantage of that. We're not here yet. If you're looking to sell your home, it's a great time to sell your home. Your equity is only down a little. If you're looking to buy, listen, people are frozen right now. Agents don't even really know how to talk. Lenders aren't really sure what to do. Sellers are hanging on the thread. You align yourself with a good team of people like the lenders at Churchill Mortgage. I would say, me as an agent, but maybe you've got your preferred agent out there, right? And now you can take advantage because everyone's sort of frozen like this and you move. Any decision right now is better than no decision. So is the market going to crash? No. Could I be wrong? Sure. Do I feel pretty confident in that? Yes. Could we absorb some hits? Sure. We could absorb an entire 2008 crash, and sellers, you're still going to have more equity than you did in 2020. It's a fantastic time to be buying or selling a piece of real estate. So I think Kevin or Mike, who's ever handling those questions, let's get after it if we have any.
Sounds good. Let's see. I can see if there's anything in here. Maybe I'm scrolling through.
There's a whole. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to say, Mike, I saw one asking about the foreclosure market in 1974. Are there any stats that include that? I don't think we have any stats going back that far, but I think it was a similar market to some of the cycles you were talking about earlier, if you want to touch on that for a second.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question on the foreclosure market. I have some data on this, but not at my fingertips. I am curious to see that, to look into that a little bit more. So if I find something, we've got let's see, who was it to ask that question? I'll forward, if I've got a good slide on that, I'll forward it out, but I don't have anything at my fingertips on that. I just know that our market today is very similar to what we experienced in the 80s, very dissimilar to 07 and 08 and 09. And it's, again, when we look at the whole point here is to answer the question, will we crash? Is it safe? Is it safe? Yes or no? In 08, we had oversupply, and today we are undersupplied. In 08, we had under demand. Today we have massive demand. In 08, we had horrible loan products that reset. Today we've got very safe loan products. And then the one thing that's the same is we have affordability challenges. So there's 1 out of 4 instead of 4 out of 4 issues that we're dealing with in this market. And that's very similar from a demographic standpoint and an affordability standpoint to the 80s from the research I've done. I actually I'll drop my email in the chat. I saw someone on the investment fund. Yes, we can talk about that. I'll put in the email for that as well. Let's see.
So while Mike's chatting, I did find my chapstick, right? Mike likes to say, I'm going to handle this green little circle for you, Mike, because I know that you do a good job talking about yourself, but it is very rare from a broker perspective to find a lender who understands what that actually means when it says we help here, right? A lot of agents don't want to be an agent or a broker, so they throw around this term consultant. And what does that even mean to you as a consumer, right? But you'll go and you'll talk to your financial advisor and you'll get advice. He'll consult you on what to do. Same thing with your taxes, right? Maybe you love the government, you want to give them all your money. Maybe you're me and you're looking to throw tea in the harbor. I don't know, right? And then you come across the real estate professional and a mortgage professional, and you think all they want to do is give me a mortgage and sell my house. It's not true, right? There are mortgage professionals like the team at Churchill that actually want to consult with you. They want to look at your debt. Do we restructure our debt? Is this the right time for you to buy? They'll actually tell you no. It's a phenomenal thing. Right? Same with myself. Of course, I only feed my family if you buy or sell, but I only want you to buy or sell if it's the right move for you financially. And there are very few, I would say, I could probably count them all on my left and right hand, that find themselves right in the middle. It says, we're here to help. It's not just get a mortgage. It's not just buy or sell. It's a healthy, what I like to would call an asset valuation if you're buying or selling, that says, what does the mortgage professional say? What does everybody say right there in the middle? So Mike and Kevin and Steve, thank you for offering a place of refuge for the consumers to go where they can feel free to get healthy consultation, healthy advice without you dripping mortgage professional all over them right there in the middle. So thank you.
Sure appreciate it, Ryan. Thank you as well for the opportunity. This has been fun.
It's been fun. And Ryan, again, hat tip to you. Guys, I can't stress enough how comforting it is to find a real estate professional that is very good relationally, very good at negotiating, and then very good with the numbers too. And Ryan's been super helpful for our fund and our efforts. So Ryan, hat tip to you. Thank you for your professionalism and for bringing us all together today.
Of course, I appreciate you guys. We'll honor everybody's time and let you go. Wherever you're going on New Year's, be safe, travel safe. But I think most importantly out of all of this, for your time and energy today, please know that you are valued, loved, and appreciated. Have a great New Year, and we look forward to seeing you in 23.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.